starts now.
One of the great additions to the Star Trek universe that emerged from the animated series of the early 1970s is the writing. The stories were so good that many found life in future episodes or films. The animation was a product of Filmation, a company that whipped out a slew of shows including Batman, The Brady Kids, Ghostbusters, and Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids. The animation style was a little cheap in the eyes of some, but allowed many TV shows to continue as Saturday morning cartoons. That show gave fans something to enjoy during the 10-year gap between the original series termination in 1969 and the release of the motion picture in 1979. Now, Star Trek Mucky Mucks are determined there shall be no gaps. All Trek, all the time. So on the heels of Discovery and Picard, prior to the release of Strange New Worlds, and whenever Section 31 might emerge, we have CBS's newest animated Trek, Lower Decks. The trailer was let loose very briefly last week. It's since been removed by CBS, so fans will have to wait until August 6 to get a real taste. But here's what we know so far, based on the online reviews, as well as having quickly reviewed the trailer. Lower Decks highlights the personnel from the, lower decks of the ship, the USS Cerritos, Starfleet's most in need of repair ship. We learn that this is a California-class ship, and its name Cerritos means Little Hills in Spanish, which also happens to be a community in LA County not far from Anaheim. Lower Decks is set within the TNG era, the obvious clue being the uniforms. We also get a glimpse of the Borg, so this could open up some promising writing avenues. The chiefs in charge of this effort were the ones who gave us Rick and Morty, and while there's an echo of the Rick and Morty style, Lower Decks seems to have its own personality, its own flair, and a character that clearly sets it within the Star Trek family. The opening scenes, for example, give the viewer sweeping external views of the ship, and the images look amazing. The one thing that I personally am going to have to hold judgment on is the comedy. The animated series in the 1970s was not a comedy. While some comic relief can be observed here and there, the show was, as a cartoon, quite highbrow. In fact, it's of a more mature storytelling. Whereas Lower Decks is, or seems to be at this point, more lower brow. The comedy seems to define the narrative as much as anything else. This might be great, but it is certainly new for a Trek broadcast. That said, I must admit that I'm a Trek nerd, and I'm eagerly awaiting this newest franchise. If the writing is good, and it almost always is in Star Trek anything, the show is going to rock. August 6th is the star date to mark on your calendars. Until then, visit stephenchristiansen.ca for more episodes. This podcast is available on premium streaming platforms including Anchor, Apple, Spotify, Google, and TuneIn. I'm Stephen Christiansen. Thanks for listening.
A production of Stephen Christiansen. Podcast complete.